going over the assignment because it's one of the most popular ones. And our theme for this workshop is how to use assignments and quizzes efficiently and effectively for grading purposes. So I will be going over 4 areas. First is the grading guide and rubric. There's some overlap there. Second is the grading workflow, which allows you and the TAs to work collaboratively to time, and release the grades to the students. And then finally, I'll be sharing grouping aspect. So first, I will be showing you what a grading guide looks like, and it's very similar to what a rubric looks like, but it's typically professors' preferences of whether they want to use rubric or grading guide. So this is what a grading guide looks like, and it has these range of input. You can input a range of score that you set up in the beginning of when you're setting up this assignment, and you are able to also insert comments, but basically you create some criteria, several criteria in here, structure and strength, etc., in the beginning when you set it up. And I'll show you how to set those up, and it's very easy, but just to show you a difference of what it looks like. So for this, you input the points, while for the rubric, you already create those points preset, and you just have to do some clicking. So if it's can do better, you click on this, fair, can do better. So you create the categories or the criteria and you click on things. So I will go ahead and show you a sample of how to create it. Let me move my screen face. And it's very easy to create one, and it will save you a lot of time for future courses and for subsequent assignments, because you can continue to use that template, change things a little bit. So I'll call the grading guide GG. And what you do is you go to grade section of the edit settings of that assignment when you create it, or later on if you want to change it, you just have to go back to edit settings. And then under grade, on the grading method, you change it from simple grading to a grading guide. And then for that, and what you want to do is instead of save and return to course, you want to go to save and display, because when you do save and display, it will lead you to this page. But let's say you accidentally clicked on the first button, go back. So you just have to click on that assignment, go to edit settings, and then go to advanced grading, and it will lead you to this. So this page is very important because it allows you to define the new grading form from scratch. But afterwards, when you create your rubric or grading guide, you just have to use that template by going to that advanced grading setting and continue to create a new template, or just revise it and copy it. So for this, we can just create it as GG. And you create the criterion, let's say use of evidence. And then the description for students, this is what the students would see when they see their grades and they see, how their grade is broken down to. So use of evidence, maybe we can say quality of it. It doesn't have to be like very long. It can be just short like this. Obviously, it's better if it's longer, but then you set a maximum score. Let's say the assignment is 10 points and you want to assign this as 5 points. You set it as that. And then another one, you can maybe say the length of the paper. And then same, you can do quantity. Okay, and then quantity. And then you can set this maybe 5 points. So this is just a sample. And here you can add frequently used comments. If you already know what comments that you frequently use, you can add it from here. And later on, let's say you find out that you have some comments that you are using frequently, you can always go back again to this draft from the advanced grading setting and add this. So let's say great job. And you can maybe add need more evidence, something like that. Oh, what did I do? Did I? Oh, it's the wrong one. Okay. Great. I thought it just got deleted. Okay, great. And then what you do is save grading guide and make it ready. These are all defaulted check, and because it just shows that the definitions will be shown to the students. So you save it. And now this is the screen that you would see when you're trying to grade an assignment. Then you're going to go for grade. And then voila. You will see that the criteria that I just created are here and right here. And you can insert frequently used comments by clicking. These are the 2 ones, but it can be multiple. So if I click on this, it will just automatically be inputted. So it's a very cool, efficient feature. Let's say, oh, this is like too small or too narrow and you want a larger screen. What you do is you can either click on this, or let me see, I don't know why, oh, right there. You can click on this, which would make it larger. All right, so let me go to rubrics. So similarly with okay, let's go back. Leave. You can create an assignment with a rubric. Go to assignment. An R, and then you change the grade into rubric. And one of the feature I wanted to mention before we go on is the blind grading feature. So if you turn this on, you won't be able to see, the students' names unless the paper that they submit as an attachment has already their names on the first page. But otherwise, when you're grading or when your TAs are grading, they won't be able to see whose paper is submitted. You're just grading based on the paper. And then so let's go to save and display. Define from scratch. And here's the section, pretty simple. So same thing, use of evidence, and then you can say none, limited, sufficient. Something, so it depends on what the range that you want to add. You can continue adding a level. And if you want, 5 points or 2 points to come first, you just have to click on this sort order and change it to descending. So save rubric and make it ready. And then go to grade. And voila. So you can continue adding different criterion, but you can click on this, this, and as you can see, it's a very tiny area. So you can just expand it by doing this, or again, you can do it this way. And I'll take questions afterwards. But now I'm going to go with grading guide. So a grading guide is something that you would use when a grading workflow. I meant grading workflow. So you would use grading workflow when you want you're collaborating with your TAs, or let's say you're grading on your own and you don't have a big chunk of time to grade all of it, but once you grade some, you don't want it to get released because then others will be like, where's my grade while Peter got his? So to avoid that confusion, you can sort of put the grades on hold before it gets released. So this is what it would look like when a grading workflow state is created. So, you just go to grade, and then these categories will be shown. And the category descriptions are written on here on the question mark. But most of the things that you and the TAs would use is the not graded. So that would be the default if it's not graded. In grading, if you want to put it in grading. But these three, grading completed, in review, ready for release, you can use all of it, or you can decide with your TAs or for yourself. But these are the ones that would hold the grade before it's released. If you set it to any of these four, it just means it's a draft. And professors wonder if it's going to be released at all or not, but be assured that it won't. And I will show you how to release the grades in bulk so that you don't have to go individually and click on each student to release the grades. And once it's released, it will send you also have an option to send an email to the students automatically. So what you do is you add an activity. Actually, this is already set. So let's say you created an activity and assignment, and this is the assignment, and you go to edit settings. And what you do is you go to grade, and then you turn on grading workflow. So right now it's on to yes. So yeah, so you just have to save and display. So now I want to show you bulk grading, bulk release for the grading workflow. So let's say everything is submitted and graded, but it's not released yet. So what you do is you go to view all submissions of that particular assignment, and then you wait for it to load. And then it's not very obvious here, but you have to scroll down and it says with selected. So you would have to select the students. So in this case, you want to release for all. And let's say if you have more than one page of students, you want to show all. Make sure that assignments per page is show all, so that all the students are selected. And then you would say, you would set it to set grading workflow state, click go. It will alert you saying like, do you want to? And you say yes, okay. And then on the bottom, instead of workflow state to grading, you release it. And then you have the option to notify that via email, and Goucher Space will push an email to the students enrolled saying this assignment is graded. And so now, finally, I am going to go over assignment groupings. So assignment grouping is a very unique tool because a lot of times, if we're in person, we do group projects and whatnot. And, online, it's a lot harder to do group projects. But this feature allows students to submit one paper per group, and it reduces confusion and download on the instructor side, and also for student side as well. Some of them ask like, oh, do we each have to upload every single paper for our group? Are all of our grades just one grade, or are all the members of the same group different grades? So all these questions can be solved with this. So first, you would have to create groups in your in your course. So one of the another feature of the grouping is that, let's say you have a few DSP, students that need special accommodation, and you've already created groups for them, but you don't want to, for this particular assignment, when you're trying to group, you don't want like all of them versus all of them and the DSP group. So you want a separate group, but just for this particular assignment only. So that's why it's a grouping instead of like the class group. And this also works well because sometimes, that your entire course might have, different groups based on the TA sections. And let's say you want to kind of mix it a little bit, have it in a different grouping just for this assignment purposes. And you can do so with this feature. So what you do is you go to users feature and then go to groups and check what groups are already in place. So obviously, I created a special accommodation if you already have some students in there in the beginning. And I created this group A, group B, and group C prior. But you can auto create groups based on you by clicking on this, and it will it will allow you to randomly distribute grades students based on how many number of students in a group you want, or you can assign them. But if you have a larger class, it might be difficult. And so then now, once your groups are created, so these are the groups that you want to potentially distribute across, you create the groupings. So you create a groupings and say this assignment is, the grouping will be called assignment for assignment X, like assignment Z. Let's just call it that way. So it's important to create the grouping first before you create the assignment with the group project. So you create the assignment Z grouping, and there aren't any groups in here. So now you're going to add the grouping, the group members. So since you've created those members, you add them all. There you go. Now you go back to groupings. So now my assignment Z has these 3 groups that I want. So now I would go back to assignment and create an activity. Group project. So for some reason with GouchoSpace/Moodle, it's important for you to decide if the assignment is going to be in a group submission setting or not, because once you create the assignment, there is a tricky way to go around it and change it to a group submit in group settings. But otherwise, if you create the assignment without group submission as yes, and then you go back, it doesn't give you this drop down option. But that could be, I'll show you that later on. But anyway, so what's suggested is you set it as yes in the very start. So there are 2 areas that you need to make sure. So this is yes. And then you assign that grouping that you created. And then you have to say group mode separate groups, because you want all the group members to only view their own group work. And then grouping assign Z. So I know it's kind of tricky, but there are 4 areas. Yes, assign Z, and then separate group assign Z. Okay. And then once you save and return to course, we'll show that this group project, it has the grouping of assign Z. And with this, you can check that these are all separated like this. You can grade it as such. And the benefit of this is that this is on the teacher side, but for the student side, only one student in that group, let's say group A, needs to submit the paper, and the rest they don't need to submit. It actually doesn't allow them to submit anymore. So the main person that submitted can add a new submission to edit. Let's say they want to change it, revise it, add a new one. So it needs to be that particular person, but other members of the group, they won't be able to submit it, resubmit or make changes. So it's important that to let your students know about that. So whoever's submitting the first is the one that's submitting. And then if your students are wondering like, oh, are we all going to get the same grade and blah, 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 you can have that on the bottom. It says here, group submission. Once this group submission is clicked to yes, you can set it to yes or no. If it's no, then when you're clicking next, you're able to grade the next student who's in that group. Although there's no submission, then you know that it's that same group. It says group A, but it's Joe. Joe will get a different grade. I think that's it. I will pass it to Luke for quizzes.
Perfect. Thank you, Ella. Great. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about quizzes. I'll start with just a brief overview of how you add a quiz and some of the important settings when you're setting up the quiz. Then I'll go over how to add a question and talk about some different question types we have. Then I'll wrap it up by talking about a really cool feature I think that GotchaSpace has, that are the quiz statistics. So you can get really in-depth statistics for the performance of your quiz and individual questions, which I think is pretty awesome. So to begin with here, you're on your course page, you have editing turned on. You would go in, click add an activity or resource, find quiz. It'll be in your recommended tab. It's also in your all tab. And you add it. Your quiz needs a name. You can add a description if you want. When students click on it, the description will show up to them. You can also display that on the course page. So if there's something like, if you just want to remind them notes aren't allowed, or maybe notes are allowed, or anything like that, you can add that info here. So now getting into the settings, there's a ton of different stuff you can do with the GotchaSpace quizzes. But some of the most common ones people do are, first of all, this timing tab. So in this, you can set when the quiz opens. So like what is the earliest students would be allowed to take it? Then also when it closes. So what is the latest students would be allowed to work on it? Then you also can enable a time limit. So for this here, students would start at 1500 today, or they could start as early as 1500. They could go as late as 1800, but this time limit only allows them to do 60 minutes. So they can spend 60 minutes on it between the hours of 1500 and 1800. The next important setting within this section is this when time expires. So this by default is set to open attempts are submitted automatically, and that should be left as default almost always. What this means is that, say a student is working and they're 95% of the way through the quiz, then their internet dies and they can't log back in. When their time expires, GotchaSpace will automatically submit that attempt for them. There are some other options. Grace period and attempts that are not submitted are not counted. But going both of those routes, if the student doesn't submit it, you're not going to be able to see any of the work they did if they lose internet. So you really want to leave that to the default. The next important one here is layout. So GotchaSpace saves students' responses every new page. This means that we recommend having like 2 to 5 questions per page. Because again, say you have 20 questions on a page, and the student goes, answers all of those, then their internet dies or their browser dies. They have to go back into GauchoSpace, open that quiz. None of their work is going to be saved. So in general, for multiple choice, we recommend every 3 questions. If you have way more involved stuff like long essay questions, you probably want it to be every single page is a new question. Next section that is super important are these review options. So this is where you define what the student can see after they take the attempt, while the quiz is open, and after it's closed. So by default, right after they take the quiz, they can see their attempt, which is the questions and what they answered. If you check this whether correct, they can also see whether their answers were correct on individual questions. The points is the overall amount of points they got on the quiz. Then specific and general feedback are for each question you can provide, like if a student answered this, here's what they should be told. It's not commonly used though. The most kind of important and commonly used things here are the attempt, whether correct, and points. So this is right after they're done. This is if they started the quiz right at the beginning of the window and say they finished it in an hour, and now there's 4 more hours where students could be attempting the quiz. This is what they can view during that time. And then finally, this is after the quiz is closed, so no one can take the quiz anymore. Commonly, people will unselect the attempt and just leave points. It's kind of an individual decision, but if you don't want students to say screenshot their attempt and send it to a friend or something like that, you would want to unselect that. And then most people allow the students to see everything after the quiz is closed because no one can take it anymore. That is the kind of last, that's the last of the really important settings to do when you're setting up the quiz. There's a bunch of other stuff that you can do, but it's less commonly used. So after you're done with that, save and display, and it'll take you to this page. Because there aren't any questions yet, we can start adding questions by either hitting edit quiz here, or I like to click on this edit quiz over here in the quiz administration menu. Because this button will go away after you add a single question. This one will always be there. So you can always click here to see what questions you have. Once you click on that, it'll bring you to this menu. You can click add and then add a new question. So there's 3 ways you can add a question in a quiz. The first is you can define a new question. And then you can add a question from the question bank and also add random questions from the question bank. We'll talk about these in a little bit. But first here, let's just add a new question. You'll be given a wide option of different kinds of question types. So GauchoSpace has a ton of different options here. The majority of them are automatically graded. So you can do calculated, drag and drop onto images, matching, numeric, short answer, true, false, etc. Multiple choice is one of the most common ones. And then essay is also pretty common. An essay is the only one here that automatically has to be graded by you. So GauchoSpace won't grade won't auto grade the main essay. There is this essay auto grade question type, and we'll go over that in a little bit. It can be pretty useful, but it does have some limitations. Okay. So we click add a multiple choice question. We give it a name. This name is something that only you see. The students won't see this question name. So you would want to name it something informative to you, like sodium channel activation, or whatever is useful for you to remember what this question is asking. And this question text is what they're going to see. And you can go down. And now you can start defining what answers you give. You can give a lot of answer options. You can always click that blank for 3 more choices to add even more. It's of course important to add at least 2. So after you define the answer, you could then define how much, like what percentage correct they will get if they select this answer. So you almost always have at least one that's 100%, but you might have also other ones that are, say, 50%. Like say you provided them with a a question and there's some common mistake people make. It's like not quite right, but it's also not massively wrong. Maybe you want to give them 50% credit for that. Maybe this is a math question, and if you drop a minus sign at this one spot, you're going to get answer 2 here. And you don't necessarily want to penalize people for that. Okay. Yeah, so that we can go in and add all of our different answers. And then so another cool thing GaugeSpace will do is it will shuffle the choices. So what one student sees, they might see answer 1 is A, 2 is B, and 3 is C. Another student might see 2 is A, 1 is B, 3 is C, etc. So you can control this here and then also in the quiz. That just provides variation among students, so they can't just text their friends answer to 1 is A, answer to 2 is B, etc., etc. So that's how we would add a new question type. We also can add questions from a question bank, and I'll talk in a second about how you add questions to your question bank. But a question bank is basically a collection of questions that you define in your course that you can pull from for all your different quizzes. And you can make tons of different categories and subcategories in this. So if you think about like the outline of everything you want to cover in your course, maybe you have computational models of neurons, and then within that you have Hodgkin-Huxley, Yasekovich, and something else. You can create 10 questions each for each of those subcategories. And then in here, you can say, okay, I want to add one question from Yasekovich neurons, go in, find that category, and select the question and add it. What this also allows you to do is add random questions. So say I defined, 15 questions on retinal function or something like that. And I want each student to see a different subset of those questions, so everyone doesn't see the same question. I can use this random question, find the category. Here I'm just going to do 1, but you could do however many you want. Then you add a random question. So now for this, every student is going to see, or not necessarily every student, but students will see a different subset of questions when they take the quiz. Okay. While we're on that topic, I want to kind of show you the question bank. This is a pretty useful thing. Welcome, Mary, by the way.
Hi, sorry, I got stuck in another meeting, so I'm joining late, but this is good.
No worries. We are recording this, so you can turn off your video if you want, and just be aware that any questions you ask will be recorded.
Okay.
And then we can make this video available afterwards too.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So as I mentioned, you can add questions from the question bank, and where you find it.
So how do you make the question bank?
Yeah. So I'll go over that right now.
Okay.
So you can, from your main GaugeSpace course page, if you go into this course administration menu, you can see question bank. And then if you click on that, it will bring you to your existing question bank. And this is, if you just click on this in an empty course, there will be no questions here, obviously. And then you can go into categories, and you can create all of the different question categories you want to have for your course. Let's say I wanted to add a question here. I'm going to add this category, computational neuron models. I add it. Now you can see it shows up right here underneath kind of this default for this entire course. And if I wanted to, I could add subcategories below that too. And then when I go and when I create a question, I have the option to put it in there. I can also do that through here. So in my question bank, hit add a new question. Let's go essay just for kicks. I have them describe, which is your favorite computational model of the neuron. Y. And then, where's my option here for what category to put it in? Yeah, right at the top here, you can see this category. So I want it to go into that computational neuron models. I just click on that, have it all typed in, save it. And now from within my question bank, I'm in this computational neuron models category. And there you can see is my question. So if I wanted to add that question to our quiz, open it up, hit edit quiz, add from question bank. I then find that category and voila, it's added. So this is the basic structure for how you create a quiz and add different questions to it. So now I want to go and show you an example. So after you have created a quiz, like say you've pre-created this, and you want to see, what will the students see when they go through it? You can go to the quiz and hit preview. And now you'll preview it as a student. And in this one, I have a variety of different question types. So I have a multiple choice. You can have these kind of like drop-down box choices. You can do drag and drop, short answer, drag and drop on images. And this is an essay one. So using that preview is how you can see, exactly what the students will see as they go through it. It won't save, like it will save your responses, but it won't put them in the grade book or anything. So that's the only difference here. Okay. So next I would like to go over, because this workshop is aimed at ease of grading, I want to go over the auto-graded essay type, auto-graded essay question type, because it can save people a lot of work if they use it. It also, does have some restrictions. So the kind of main ways that you can grade students on the auto-graded essay type are, as one might expect, word count. So you can say, you have to have over 250 words. And then using these target phrases. So there's really no way to auto-grade for, like broad idea understanding or anything like that. But say, you wanted them to briefly describe some concept and make sure they use these 4 keywords. And if they don't have those 4 keywords, they got it incorrect. So you can define each keyword, define the percentage they should get if they have that one. Here we'll just say 2. Perfect. So now when students take this and they take this question, if they had those 2 keywords, they'd get 100%. And yeah, you can obviously have many different keywords. Like if there's 4 alternative keywords you could use in place of 1, you could add all of those in there and stuff like that. So then once you have that, though, it is important to go back in and look at students' actual responses, because that way you can make sure, like when you set up this auto-graded thing, you want these target phrases, but there are ways students could word things to avoid saying that target phrase and, still be correct. So you want to go through and quickly skim all their results. And so you can do that by, if you go into your quiz, go into results, and click manual grading. Click this also show questions that have been graded automatically. Now this will pull up all of the different questions that were in your quiz, as well as the question type. So if I go into this auto essay 1, I use this quiz, I hit update grades there. And that will bring me to a page where it has each student and what their answer was, as well as how many points they got. And so here's where you could skim through this. You can provide feedback here. You can also change their amount of points. So here's a student got 0. You might be like, add some comment like reread the chapter or like please see me. Or maybe they like actually answered it partially correct and just missed the keywords. So you could update that there. You can continue to go down. Perfect. And so that route of going to results and then manual grading is also how you would grade the manual essay questions. So there's also the normal essay question where people can type in long form whatever they want, and GotchaSpace will not grade it based off target phrases or anything like that. So to look at things like that, you go into the quiz, again, results, manual grading. Here you can see there's this one manual graded question that we haven't graded yet. You can click to grade, and then it'll go up. Here's the student, here's what they said, here's your feedback, and here's how many points you gave them. And you can just go down pretty quickly, skim through it, assign a grade, and continue. Okay. What else we got here? Yeah, let's do overrides. So another thing that often comes up is when students have some sort of DSP accommodation. And so say they need 1.5 time or something like that. Luckily, you can pretty easily add that. If you go into your quiz, hit user override, click add user override. You can then find the student and change a bunch of stuff. You can, of course, give them more time, as we just mentioned, but also maybe they're in a completely different time zone. They're back home in Russia and taking the quiz, and you want them to not have to take it in the middle of the night. You can also define new open and close dates for them. And say you have a really big class, like 200 people, and you have 25 people that have a 1.5 time DSP. You can also add a group override. So Hala showed earlier how to create groups. You could just create a DSP group, which I've created here, special accommodations. You can define some new time limit for all of them, and then hit save and enter into override. You can save. And now this will give every student within that group this new time. So rather than going in and student by student by student adding overrides, you can do it in one go right there. Cool. So last thing I want to talk about really quickly is GotchaSpace calculates a lot of really interesting statistics for the quiz features. It calculates overall quiz performance, obviously like percent correct and stuff like that, but also has a bunch of stats for the individual questions. This can be super useful just to look at and kind of determine how well your quiz is performing and how well certain questions are performing. So yeah, if you go to the quiz, results, statistics, it'll pull this up. So first here you get the overall quiz information. So what is the name, the course, how many people did it, the average of the first attempts and all attempts. If you allow multiple attempts, you can here kind of gauge how performance was increasing. And of course, normal stuff like median, standard deviation. Was your distribution skewed higher or lower? All kinds of that stuff. And so one of the cool things here is this coefficient of internal consistency. This is a measure of how consistent students performed on your quiz. So here you want this to be pretty high, because that means that students that performed well, on average, performed well across all of it. If this is low, it means that there's one chunk of questions where, for some reason, high-performing students performed poorly on, and low-performing students performed really well on, which, can happen if there's many different topics covered within your quiz, and maybe some group finds topic A more interesting. But in general, it's worth further investigation. So then the second part, which is what I think is the most cool here, are all of these, it's under quiz structure analysis, are the statistics for the individual questions. So here you can see the question, number of attempts. The facility index is the percentage of students that got it correct. So you can pretty quickly scan down this and be like, oh boy, for this question, only 30% of students got it correct. That means that either it was confusingly worded, maybe I selected the wrong answer as correct, or maybe it was just too hard and I need to go back in and recover that topic with all the students. Next up in here, kind of the main useful thing are the discrimination index and discrimination efficiency that both measure the same thing. Basically, they measure the correlation between performance on this question and the overall quiz. So it's saying, how well would this question have done at sorting students into high and low performing based off of the entire rest of the quiz? So in other words, did students that performed well on this question perform well on the entire quiz? And students that performed low on this performed low on the entire quiz? Or was it just kind of, random, or perhaps the low performing students performed high on this question? So this is better to be higher. And so at the last part here, you have this little chart that goes over and kind of quickly and visually shows you the two main things people use, which is the facility index and that discrimination efficiency. You want this orange bar to be as high as possible. And this facility index, you don't want it at 100%. You don't want everyone getting every question or everyone getting the question correct, but you can pick your own range there, but probably between 60 and 90, most people shoot for. So you can look at this and pretty quickly see, like, question 4 didn't seem to discriminate performance at all. I should probably look into that question more and see what's going on there. This statistics are especially helpful when you have random questions. So I mentioned earlier that you can add a subset of like 3 random questions from a category on computational neuron models to the quiz, right? Let's say I just wrote all these 15 questions. There's naturally going to be some variation in difficulty across those. And maybe I add one that is just massively, massively more difficult, right? How do I know that? You go into your quiz, you see these default or random questions. And at the end of your string of random questions, you see this range of statistics. You'll hit view details there. And now it will pull up that every question that was provided in that chunk of random questions. So you can see here, this test file picker was given once. What was Chancellor Yang's last name, given twice, et cetera, et cetera. And you can really quickly scan here. And the main thing you often want to look at is this facility index. Because, if most of the questions, 75% of people got them correct, and then you have one that nobody got correct, it means the students that got that question got a really, really difficult question, most likely. And so their quiz was not fair compared to the other students. That was a varying level of difficulty. Okay. Yeah, I think that is all the main stuff I wanted to cover here. So I'm going to stop recording and then we can have some questions and answers here.